Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to another video on ForgottenWeapons.com. I'm Ian McCollum, and I'm here today in Bern, Switzerland, visiting the Swiss Shooting Museum, and we are taking a look at one of the guns that they have in their reference collection, a super rare, super cool experimental Swiss machine gun. This is a Stamm-Saurer machine gun, and this is specifically one of the air-cooled variations. So I have videos on a couple of other Stamm guns that came first. This was developed by a guy named Hans Stamm. He first developed a gas piston operated rifle in 1902. It was a gun significantly ahead of its time, really cool. He did this for a firm called the Zeller and Company that ended up not getting any contracts. They decided to stop making guns, but they kept the patent to his gas piston system. He went on to work with a company called Saurer, which was a truck maker at the time. They still actually exist today. They were bought up by Ehrlichen something like 20 years ago. And under Saurer, he led the company's weapons division and developed a number of different guns. They first tried to develop a straight pull bolt action to compete for Swiss military contracts, which they didn't get. He then developed a really overly complex long recoil action. This whole time he couldn't go back to using his original really elegant design because the patents were owned by the original company, which opted not to sell them. By 1914, like World War I has broken out, there isn't a lot of opportunity to sell rifles internationally, sell new designs internationally. And at this point, the long recoil action is clearly not going anywhere. So in 1915, Stamm develops yet another different type of action. It is a short recoil action, and it is essentially this system. In 1915, he builds two machine gun versions, and they're both water-cooled. He sends one of them to the Swiss military for testing. They get some testing results back, get some impressions back from the military, and the message is that they'd rather have an air-cooled version. So 1916, he goes back and builds two air-cooled versions of the same gun, and this is one of those two guns. That's why it has this big, what looks like a big water jacket on it. It's because this was designed as a water-cooled gun, but then adapted into an air-cooled gun. To be clear, this was built from scratch in this configuration, but in order to simplify the design work, they left the jacket assembly basically in place. So these would also be tested by the Swiss military. And before we talk about where they went, let's go ahead and take a closer look at how it works. All right, if we take a look at the action here, we have, first off, a big old safety dust cover lever that covers the entire action. That's pretty cool, and it is a feature carried over from Saurer's long recoil rifle. This is chambered for the Swiss GP11 cartridge, and it has a 20-round magazine. So you can see the stripper clip guide up here. Fixed flush magazine or a fixed blind magazine, doesn't use a detachable one. Relatively standard sort of rear sight. It has just a U-notch rear sight. There is a bipod that is put on the water jacket, or the X-water jacket, now an air jacket here. This can pivot 180 degrees, and honestly, this bipod is a complete disaster. There is no stop to the legs. They pivot 180 degrees forward and back. So you cannot actually stand the gun up on the bipod without it collapsing either forward or backward. And at the front end, of course, we have the front sight. We have the barrel, which reciprocates back. This is a short recoil gun. Then we have this plug, double plug here, which is actually the end of this tube. The return spring for the bolt is inside that tube. Here's the back end of it. And there's this connecting rod connecting to the front of the bolt. So when I fire, the bolt's going to go forward. It's going to rotate, lock forward, immediately fire. It has a fixed firing pin. And the bolt's going to come back and lock open, as long as I'm not holding the trigger down. All right, for disassembly, there's actually a really cool system here where the gun comes apart right in the middle. And what we need to do in order to take it apart is disconnect this guide rod, this return rod, from the bolt. Then we're going to take out this screw. But in order to get this out, we go to the front of the gun. This is just a cap We take this out. There we go. Serial number 3. We then have a hollow tube here, and inside it is the end of this guide rod that has a screwdriver flat so that you can just unscrew it from the inside. However, we don't have a screwdriver long enough, so we're going to sort of ad hoc jerry-rig this instead. All right, so through the magic of editing, we unscrew this connecting rod and return spring, take that out. Then we come back to here and we take this connecting screw out. Then I can just lift the back half of the gun clean off of the front half. That's a pretty slick system. Next up, to take out the bolt, we need to take off this end cap. There is a little plunger right there. So I'm going to push that pin in. You would normally do this like with the head of a cartridge. There we go. That lets me start it. And then I can unscrew this end cap. We do have a buffer, small buffer down in the bottom. And then I can just pull out the bolt. Next up, I need to take out the barrel so I can show you how that works. The barrel has a nut on the end of it that holds a spring in there. Since this is a short recoil gun, we need some sort of spring to pull the barrel back into battery. So there's that, and then the barrel. One more step here, we're going to pull this screw off. There is an out of battery safety here, which is actually a really quite clever design, but it prevents me from pulling the barrel all the way out. So we take that screw out, plate the spring, and this is our out of battery safety. And then I can pull the barrel out. Now, the major shortcoming, I think, of this machine gun is the fact that it actually has just a single locking lug up here at the front. It's asymmetric and it's only one. It is a pretty big locking lug, but still, that's not a great design. This looks like a second locking lug on the opposite side and end of the bolt, but this is actually the cam lug that causes the bolt to rotate to lock and unlock. Now, this fires from a fires from an open bolt, so it has a fixed firing pin. As the bolt rotates, you can see the firing pin comes forward automatically there, and then when it unlocks, the firing pin is retracted. The locking shoulder for our one locking lug is actually in this barrel extension. You can see it's screwed onto the end of the barrel. It's going to go in here and rotate like that to lock. So our out of battery safety here sits in this slot in the barrel extension, which, by the way, is located right next to the locking surface recess, which is probably not a great plan, but it sits here. Its purpose is to prevent the bolt from going in and rotating if the barrel's not fully forward. The problem is if the barrel is at the rear of its travel, the locking cam on this rear bolt lug will force the bolt to rotate, and it will cause it to fire while it has no movement available. Like there's no space for the action to recoil backwards, which means it will unlock too quickly and you have a potential out of battery, well, high pressure extraction, and the case will blow up. So that's what this is there for. So if I put the bolt just in the rear section of the action here and close it, you can see how this is forced to rotate by the second lug up here camming inside the receiver. That goes forward, rotates down, and as soon as it does rotate down, the firing pin protrudes, it fires. So the barrel at that point is in this position, and it's going to recoil that far, just like that. That forces the bolt to rotate and unlock, travel all the way back, catch behind the sear, and it's ready to fire another shot. Once the bolt has unlocked and is moving rearward, the barrel has this spring assembly compressed here because it's moved backwards, and this spring is going to pull the barrel forward so that it's ready for the next shot as well. All right, and there it is, a fully disassembled, or at least field stripped, plus a little bit, Stamm-Saurer light machine gun. I do want to point out, just as sort of a behind the scenes aside, it took us a very long time to figure out how the heck this thing works, because it's actually possible to miss, like you can set the gun up a little bit wrong and that out of battery safety will instead act as a, well, basically a firing prevention device. And yeah, there were like 4 of us who spent probably an hour working through this gun. And so it's actually quite a bit simpler than it feels to me because of how much time we spent on that stupid little thing. Anyway, not necessarily a bad design overall, but the single locking lug I think is the real Achilles heel of the design. So the Swiss military is also not really interested in this air-cooled version. In 1917, there will be one further example of the gun that's manufactured, and it is an air-cooled, double-barreled anti-aircraft model. And they send it to the Swiss military for testing. And apparently some testing is done, and then the gun's mounted on the top of one of the Army administration buildings to actually use as an anti-aircraft gun, and no further information exists about what happens to it. So that makes a grand total of 5 Stamm-Saurer machine guns manufactured. 2 water-cooled, 2 air-cooled, including this one. This is serial number 3, and 1 double-barreled. The project pretty much well, as a machine gun, the project ends there. Between 1917 and 1920, Stamm would take the same operating system and adapt it to semi-automatic rifles. And he spent 3 or 4 years working on developing that as a project. Ultimately, in 1920, the owner of Sauer, Adolf Sauer, passed away, and with his death, the Sauer weapons division ended because his son, who took over the company, wasn't interested in maintaining that part of the business. So Stamm was left once again without a host company to work for. Although that wouldn't last long, he passed away in 1922, unfortunately the victim of an accidental shooting of himself with one of his own guns, interestingly. So the patents, to wrap up the story of Hans Stamm here, the original patents for his first gas-operated gun were sold to Waffenfabrik Solothurn in 1928, and they formed the basis for Solothurn's gas-operated gun development in the late 20s and 1930s. The patents from Sauer were never resold. The son, his name was, I think, Hyperion Sauer, had ethical objections to weapons manufacture and opted to never reopen their weapons division nor sell the gun patents, which frankly is probably no significant loss to the arms industry because none of those further designs were all that relevant or useful. This one's not bad. The long recoil one is a complete disaster. So it was extremely cool to get a chance to take a look at this, to pull it apart, to show you guys how it works. I'd like to give a big thanks to the Swiss Shooting Museum in Bern for giving me the opportunity to do that. If you happen to find yourself in Bern and you're interested in firearms or the history of Swiss competition shooting, you should definitely stop in and check out the museum. They have a whole bunch of cool guns on display, as well as all sorts of historical devices and trophies and prizes and paraphernalia surrounding the history of Swiss shooting. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching.